Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Witness. Today, we're going to be starting from the marsh, and we're actually going to be starting by taking the boat, because today we are going to be going to the treehouses. Now, the only way you can actually get to the treehouses to start off with is by taking the boat. There's no actual other way it connects to the island at the start of the game. So we're going to take a quick little boat ride there. We may as well make it go as fast as possible. And hey, we can get a nice little view of it as we go along. So who could complain about that, right? But I found the treehouse is actually one of probably the hardest area to really kind of grasp exactly what's going on. I like how the tree, I love the effect that it uses to do pop-in, that it kind of does like a pixelated type of drawing. There's some reasons for it, I think, as well, but we won't be talking about those for a long time, so let's keep it as is for now. But as you can see, we are slowly coming across the area, and just as some notes, we're not going to be talking about it too much until a little bit later in the video, but note how, even though it looks like this whole thing's just made of wood, there is actually underlying metal underneath. I'm not 100% sure if that's used, if they're using that for like grounding of some form, but it is there. Keep it in mind. We'll be talking about it. But let's start off by just kind of going through the regular series of events that you're going to use to get through this area. So the first thing that you're doing is we just walk right up here, and our first type of puzzle that we're getting is this guy right here. So nice and simple puzzle. You can see that it's using, I believe it's a brown background, unless it's the shadow is really screwing up the red, but I'm pretty sure I would call that a brown background. And you also get orange stars, which we've never seen actually before. And it's a pretty simple puzzle to start off with. All you have to do is that, or you can do it this way, but it won't work that way. So basically, it's really quickly teaching you that you just need two of the same thing for these star puzzles to be able to work. And you can see we walk into a nice little building, and we get our second puzzle. Again, same idea, just a little bit bigger paneling, but again, we just want to make sure that we have both of the stars in line, and then we're all set to go. So then we come across our first real set of puzzles, and this is kind of your main tutorial area. Teaches you a little bit more. Again, starts off pretty easily, just two things. Then you start learning that if you have four of the same thing, you still have to split it up in twos. You can't have like 3 stars or 4 stars in a row. It always has to be 2 and 2 for everything. And it teaches you all of those all the way through it. And you get into this building right here, and from this building you get actually 3 options that you can take. So you get the magenta way, you get the way that takes you up to this tree, this kind of rose, red, violet, magenta-ish color tree, and you also get another path up here that you can see takes you to a different path altogether. So we're going to start off by just going through the magenta path. I think that's the way the majority of people would do it, just because you see those panels first. And again, notice how that we do have that magenta paneling, however, it's actually still orange stars through it, and it's the exact same rules as before, and it actually doesn't teach you anything different in this, which I found is kind of interesting, that it's the exact same rule set as the yellow. There's actually nothing that you're learning from these panels other than just doing more of the same problems. So that's a little odd, but we'll talk about that as we go along. From there, we keep on going up and up and up. We get into another structure. Again, we're just going to rush through this because we are going to talk pretty in depth about a lot of these areas. But our next set of puzzles actually has the stars, but then we're starting to add the black and white squares that we'd seen all back in our first episode, and we have to start kind of dealing with the consequences of that. So you have to have the black and white separated while still having the 2 stars in one of the things, and it gets more elaborate, and you can see that it actually starts switching things up. It'll have white stars and orange squares, but it's all the exact same style. The biggest thing that you learn in this area is that you can't actually, where's a good puzzle to show it? Is that you can actually have 2 of the same color star with different color squares, and also Yeah, actually, that's the only one that it's going to teach you in this one, is that stars can actually go with different color squares, so that's kind of neat. What's really cool about this, though, is that this magenta color, it looks a little bit lighter than a lot of the magenta that we've seen. It seems a little bit more like it got infused with blue, which would turn it more into a violet color. And it's kind of fun that those type of problems are also the blue problems, so kind of neat there. But we keep on going up and up, and we get into orange puzzles now, and this one teaches you a similar thing to what the other one said, but it's a little bit different. Basically, it's teaching you now that if we go like this, it actually is wrong. So you can actually only have two of the same color. Doesn't matter if it's the star or the square. If there's any stars whatsoever, you can only have two of it. But if we go this way, you can have it so that you've got the two white stars, and that's all in the black and the whites are still separated. Then it keeps on going all the way through this, and it starts throwing different colors at you, but the concepts are the exact same. Doesn't matter if it's color or black and white, it does the same type of thing. What's really cool is that you actually get multiple branching paths, and the first time I actually went through here, I did it this way, and I actually didn't even see that it could branch off into multiple paths until after I'd already went this way and got confused as to what to do. So we're going to start off by going this way. I think most people would go straight through here as kind of the easiest way of solving that puzzle. So you go through, and again, you're just doing harder and harder puzzles, basically, of how these colors switch. And notice how at the end it actually does get easier for these two. So it's actually an easy puzzle, and then a hardest one over here. And on these ones, it's kind of easiest all the way to hardest up until there as well. And then after we've gone through all these easy puzzles, then you only get black and white ones afterwards. So it's a little interesting the way that they've done that. There's probably some reasons for it, I think. So from here, we get another one of those secret type panels, which I'm not going to talk about at the moment. But we get our first kind of visual cue over here, our optical illusion. So if you look at it from this side, it's just a lot of wood with a little bit of planks on this kind of burnt building and burnt tree. But if you look at it from this side, you actually could get it so it looks like it's actually someone making fire. And interestingly enough, that's the tree that is burnt down. So a little fun there. We're going to talk about this a little bit more. Also, the way that this tree may have burnt down, but it probably won't be in this episode. It'll probably be a little bit further down the road. Also, though, you can climb up here, so you can climb up this building, and it actually gets you to the laser. What's interesting, though, is that you don't activate the laser from here. So even though you can see the laser and see the nice little cool engravings on it and everything else, you can't physically access it. You have to go through here, which is a barred door. So the first time you go through here, you kind of get a little confused as to what you're going to do to get this door. Like I said, you can also switch the paths, so you can do something like this. Go on through, and it'll switch you to whatever way that you exit the path. So in this case, it's now going to go all the way over here. The way that they made these panels is so cool. I love how, like, it looks like they would actually be able to kind of support stuff, the way it locks and everything, but it must have taken a little bit of engineering feat to be able to figure out how to make that thing work. So we get our burnt area. Notice also how there is a little panel like this, and that is actually similar with all of these. There's always an entrance point like that on it. So at one point in time, there used to probably be panels there. But let's keep going down the main path. So if we want to go the main path, we're actually going to do this and go the other way. And we'll see why soon enough. So I'm just going to leave it that way. We'll talk about this path again later, but at the moment, there's nothing else that we can do there. So we go all the way down, and we have to go back into our main building that has the multiple paths. From here, a lot of people I find, from what I've seen, go up this main path just to kind of see what's up here. Like I said, you can see all of the tree foliage going from violet or magenta all the way up to red. And we get a panel like this, which actually opens the door. So a lot of people at this point will start running through and trying to run into there, and you're going to notice that this is going much too quickly to be able to actually get all the way back around. So you're left with an interesting little bit of a conundrum trying to take care of that. So nothing really else that we can do on this part. The first time you enter it, notice that there is an orange path there, but it wouldn't have been there if this is your first time through the area. So you have to go down this third path. We see that there used to be some yellow panels here, but they are, for some reason, gone now. And we keep going up and up and up. And we also get two paths, so we get a path that goes for green, and we get an orange path. And this one is a little bit different than the other one. This one is only using at the start orange and magenta, and at first it's just separating them. Then you learn that it goes together, and then it gets more and more complicated all the way through it. Again, same idea, you actually get multiple paths that you can go through. So for right now, we're just going to deal with this one and figure out the laser, and then we'll talk about the other ones. So if you put it in the right way, you can angle it so it goes this way all the way through. You can notice how it stays just orange and magenta, and then eventually, when we finally get over here, it adds green as well. So our main colors that we're dealing with in this area seems to be orange, magenta, and green in terms of panel colors. And you can see that you get another option right here to switch it to what direction you want if you put it this way. Now you've got yourself a path that if you put this timer on, I can run up here, go through it, and you get to your actual puzzle, or your actual laser panel right up there. And notice how you get another thing, so you're not inconveniently trapped right in for the rest of eternity, which is pretty darn cool. So that's kind of your main path through it. So what does it mean? Is the main question, and it's a question that took me a very, very long time and looking around everywhere to kind of really grasp what this area is about. I just want to talk about a couple details in here because I don't feel like re-putting the path up. So notice that in this area, it looks like it's kind of older wood. You can see it doesn't look the same color as a lot of the wood outside. We'll show some more examples as we go along. But you also get a light, and this is actually the only light in the entire area. It's actually really the only, other than the panels, it's the only other thing of electricity in this whole place, which is kind of cool. But we go back through and we'll talk about the rest of the stuff. So let's start off by going through this, and like I said, you can go a couple different ways on this. So the first way you can go is this way right here. If we switch it completely to the other side, wait for it as it goes. Just, every time I see these paddles fold out on themselves, I just think it's the coolest thing. But as you get there, it takes you to this area right here, and normally when you first come to this area, it will look like this, and this bridge is actually closed, so you can't access the other side. Initially, you have to go through the boat to get here. But if I solve this puzzle a different way, by having the purple and the orange in the same thing, it actually activates a different type of panel exit, which is really cool because it's actually going through the same exit both times. The only difference is whether I have it split up or whether I have it all together. And when it is all together, that's what lets you access the island normally, so I can actually get to this area right over here. While we're here, we may as well go down the lower path and start talking about that, and then we'll work our way all the way back up. How about that? Why not, right? So we've gone through all the top of the area. You can see the bottom of the area starts off with a couple dead trees and a burnt tree, but we also see a lot of life growing as well. We see little trees that are starting to grow right out here. You can see more, I believe these are trees that are growing. It might be roots that are protruding, but I think it's trees that are starting to grow, and this is just kind of like their starting shape, but it could be roots, or it could be something altogether different. I'm not an expert on it by any means. You can see that we have a lot of these trees where the roots are exposed. Actually, almost all of them are exposed. And more often than not, that caused by the topsoil in the ground leaving for various reasons. And we'll talk about why that may be as we go on. But I think there's some good reasons for it. And you can see, so on the bottom, there's actually paint. So the orange ones are painted orange. The green panels actually have green paint on the bottom. And so that's kind of neat. But let's talk about our first audio quote as we go back through this area, shall we?
These hearts were woven of human joys and cares, washed marvelously with sorrow, swift to mirth. The years had given them kindness. Dawn was theirs, and sunset, and the colors of the earth. These had seen movement and heard music, known slumber and waking, loved, gone proudly friended, felt the quick stir of wonder, sat alone, touched flowers and furs and cheeks. All this is ended. There are waters blown by changing winds to laughter, and lit by the rich skies all day. And after, frost, with a gesture, stays the waves that dance in wandering loveliness. He leaves a white, unbroken glory, a gathered radiance, a width, a shining peace under the night. Rupert Brooke, 1914.
So, especially with the placement of that quote, it seems like it has a direct reference, which is talking about the people that were at one point on this shipwreck and how they had lived valuable lives and how they had all had various experiences and loved and lost and all of these other emotions that we feel and everything, just life experience. And eventually it ends. What's cool about it is that it talks about the way that nature does this as well. It talks about the way that waves blow towards laughter and everything else. Yet, over time, nature changes that, and it turns to frost. It stills the waves. Yet, the way they describe, the way this person describes it is, it's still beautiful. It's still something that has kind of an awe-inspiring thing to it, even though no longer anything's moving. The waves are dead. There's still stuff that's coming from it, and especially with this type of area, it seems very much that's kind of the same idea. It looks like we're going to see more of this, but it seems like a lot of the trees have died over time and stuff has grown from it, that death, everything else. Just like you see in forests all the time, if you see like a forest fire, it'll kill or burn majority of the trees, but because of that, it puts all of the nutrients back into the earth so new stuff can actually grow again. And I think that's represented here pretty well. Having that literal thing with the people as well is pretty cool to have everything just kind of mixed up in this area. But so that's kind of our first quote to kind of just get a general idea here. Things are usually meaning more than one thing in this area, to say the least. So let's talk about a couple other things. So like I mentioned, we start by seeing all of these wood panels, but there is actually metal underneath. So right from the get-go, we're actually having two types of experiences. We have that kind of natural, it's made of nature, everything else, and this metal, which is a lot more man-made, even though the metal itself isn't fully man-made, but it's a lot more man-made process than just, say, cutting a tree or anything else, actually making the metal into that. So we already get this kind of human interaction along with just a regular, more so natural path. What we also get, and this is one of my favorite parts in the game, is this right here. So you can see, if you can kind of tell, it's this shape all around here. It makes a woman praying through the reflection. So you can see that the trees and the rocks this would be the head right here. These would be the hands, the shoulders, the hips, and so on. But what's really, really neat about this area is right from, I believe it's right here, you would actually go I forget if it's here or here. One of the two areas, but this is actually the path that we got from the marsh that leads to that kind of natural area where there's no puzzle panels. You actually walk right through here, and then about right here would be where that tree is that looks like a bird. So you could actually see that you're walking on top of basically this cutout carving of a woman praying in this natural area, and it's really neat that you can only see it from the treehouse. You can't see it from the marsh whatsoever, but that's just a really cool effect. I love that effect. We got one more quote that we're going to talk about here, and then we're going to do a little bit of traveling to get one other one afterwards. So let's start off with this one, though, shall we?
God bade me behold the sea, and I saw the ships sinking and the planks floating. Then the planks too were submerged. And God said to me, those who voyage are not saved. And he said to me, those who, instead of voyaging, cast themselves into the sea, take a risk. And he said to me, those who voyage and take no risk shall perish. And he said to me, in taking the risk, there is a part of salvation. And the wave came and lifted those beneath it and overran the shore. And he said to me, the surface of the sea is a gleam that cannot be reached, and the bottom is a darkness impenetrable. And between the two are great fishes, which are to be feared. Nefari, circa 970. What?
So some really cool stuff from this quote. Keep it a little bit in your head for a minute. But so first off, you do get that interesting last part, which is very different from all the other quotes. You actually hear the person saying the quote actually talking. So maybe an allusion to something that might happen down the road, possibly. I'm going to cut to the other quote, and I'll show you where it is. It's actually right on this rock right here, but we'll be back. And we're back, you guys. So you can see there is an audio log that's hidden right on this rock. You do need the boat to actually get it. So we'll listen to that as we're going back, and then we'll talk about both the quotes.
Lustily, I dipped my oars into the silent lake, and as I rose upon the stroke, my boat went heaving through the water like a swan. When, from behind that craggy steep, till then the horizon's bound, a huge peak, black and huge, as if with voluntary power instinct, upreared its head. I struck and struck again, and growing still in stature, the grim shape towered up between me and the stars. But after I had seen that spectacle, for many days my brain worked with a dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being. O'er my thoughts, there hung a darkness. Call it solitude or blank desertion. William Wordsworth, 1888.
So we'll start off by talking about that second quote. So in it, it's actually an excerpt from another excerpt of a very, very large poem that I think it's like 13 or 14 books long. It's basically this person's autobiography, basically, in a poem form, goes through kind of a lot of what his early childhood was all the way into his adulthood, and then all of the theories that he has get kind of explained from that afterwards. But basically what's happening in this first quote is he takes the ship out and he sees this kind of island on the horizon, and he wants to go all the way to it. And from there, as he gets closer and closer to it, just like any shape, as it gets closer and closer, it just starts rising above you, and you actually start seeing how big it really is. And to him, when he started seeing this, it wasn't just a rock formation that was getting bigger and bigger, or an island that was getting bigger and bigger. He felt that it had a sense of being in it, but one that wasn't similar or familiar to him. It was something entirely different nature, and this island had basically taken a form of its own, something that he couldn't quite understand. But it started actually troubling him really, really deeply, and it's actually from that poem, if you keep on reading on and on, you realize that this is kind of his first experience with nature and kind of realizing the power of nature, that nature has its own sense of being. It's not just there for us to kind of look at, but it has its own presence and state of mind and everything else. And after I looked at that, I was re-looking through the island, and I found what I believe to be another optical illusion, which is this right here. And if I can position it right, which I'm always horrible at, but yeah, around something like this. And you can see it looks like this is a person's head, and in the back it looks like this tree is kind of intruding into the back of its mind. And that's very similar to the state of mind of that person. Was he senses that this nature is kind of prevalent. It's actually guiding his thoughts a lot more than what most people would think. It's not just his decision or he feels this emotion because of something that he did. It's actually nature that's kind of guiding him along, and nature is actually kind of almost representing a god type of figure in this example, where it's basically the one that's causing all of these things. So I thought that was a really, really cool little optical illusion. But kind of going forward onto it, we can also see that first quote that was talking about how these people, if they voyage just by themselves, they will perish. Now, this is a person that is actually, what he's talking about is getting to God. If you read a little bit more on his stuff, you don't actually find too much about him. But basically what he's talking about is ways to be able to see God, and to do that, if you just kind of voyage and you just kind of, you take this ship or anything else and you're kind of relying on the ship to get you there, you're relying on these materialistic things to get you to be able to see God yourself, you're never going to do it. You're missing the point. The point is that if you want to be able to see God, you have to trust in him. You have to trust that God is going to lead you to him. And in this case, you would have to plunge yourself into the sea. You can't just assume that this ship is going to take you there. In this example, these people could see this wave that was coming for them, and if they stayed on the ship, they would have got hit by this wave, and that's what caused a shipwreck. And again, you get direct reference to a shipwreck that is staring us right in the face. But if they plunge themselves into the sea, they're trusting in God. They're believing that they were taking this voyage, and if they plunge themselves into the sea, God is going to lead them to heaven's gate, as it were. And those are the people that'll actually see it. And it's really, really neat that this first part of the island where we actually land on the boat is completely separated from our main island entirely. There's a lake, or a river kind of in it, or you can call it its own little mini island. Even though it's only just trees, there's actually no land mass that we can really see, to be honest. But what do we do to be able to get to this other side is we go through this yellow path, this path of godliness, to be able to get to the island, to be able to see it. So I think there's some really, really direct references there as to kind of what this island may be in this case. Not exactly what it is, but the themes of it. It seems like this area has a lot to do with death and rebirth. It talks a lot about people dying, and it talks a lot about taking that risk. And if you take a risk by plunging into the sea, which would probably kill you in the real world, but it's actually going to bring you to this kingdom of heaven. So some really neat stuff there. And now we start kind of talking about so why are the panels the way they are? Why is this place the way it is? So if you're looking at it, you can see that this whole place is built of wood and metal. But if you look on here, the main areas are actually built upon these very distinct type of trees, and majority of the structures in this area are actually built from these trees. So this one is built on top. You can see that the planks are what's holding it together here. And if you look at the wood, you can also see this one looks like it's made of probably newer wood. And as you go along here, you can see it's kind of a little bit more weathered along this path, and it gets a little bit cleaner towards the end. And again, we get another kind of one of these huge trees. You can see it from this area. This is actually its full tree. And that's where this gate is to get you all the way over. And again, the next building is built right on this type of tree, which is a very distinct type of tree to these other ones. Like these guys are definitely a different species of tree. I don't know the name of either, I'm sorry. But if anyone does, put it in the comments below. I would love to actually know what type it is. I tried looking for it, and I couldn't seem to match any of them. But, so, what do we get? We get two different paths, basically, that lead us, or three paths, but two main ones. And the first one is this magenta path. And this magenta is basically a combination of just science, right? We already talked about magenta being kind of this technological side of things, and it's kind of cool that magenta is that first thing that you really see in this path, and all of the ways to be able to get across this place, to be able to even get to the laser in the first place, you need to cross the path that's made by technology. There's no other way of getting there. There's no other bridges or anything else. What's cool is that these buildings on the magenta path actually don't go with these original style trees. They're actually hanging from just these regular ones. You can see there's little metal hooks, and the whole structure is supported just by beams and by being hoisted up. And same thing with the actual path itself. It's not damaging any of these trees. Everything's being built around nature. They're not destroying nature to be able to make these types of paths. And we keep on going up, and notice how we're always going higher in everything. We never actually go downwards in any path that we take. Everything is upwards for the most part, except for one exception that we'll talk about soon. And we get the orange panels that allow us to switch things. So what else happens here? And I think this is one of the coolest little details that I picked up on this place, is if you switch... If we switch it back this way, you can actually notice it a little bit here, but the path is a little bit weathered here. Would make some sense, it's right at the edge, it's all weathered, but same thing goes for this side of the building entirely. Look at that. From here, it's a lot more weathered style wood. Everything's a little bit more broken down, worn down. It seems like a lot of time has passed in this part of the building. However, without even being a clear distinction, it kind of subtly fades from being this old, weathered-down building to basically brand new wood all the way through here to the door, which is literally brand new. But there's no clear transition. It's not like certain strips, like this strip isn't just pure weathered or anything else. It goes from severely weathered to a lot more newer. This one, same thing. It's really, really weathered on one side, and then it goes there. So it seems like time is a little bit different. It doesn't seem like it would just have weathering just from that by itself. It seems like multiple things have been built here over time, and conditions are actually affecting it. What's really cool is that that's around this orange area, and we're going to see more evidence for this when we talk about the desert ruins. But time has it seems like time has a very big impact on the color orange, and a lot of things that involve any form of time chronology, or just not distortion of time, but kind of clumping lots of time periods together, seems to involve the color orange. So that's the one path right there. And that's half of the way of being able to kind of solve getting the laser in this area. And the other path, that one's just orange. So there's actually nothing that we need to do this way. It's just orange all the way through. But notice that these orange panels really switch, so you always have the orange and the purple here. There's always that kind of balance of two different things that, when they're combined, is actually what's getting you the way to get to the laser. It's also the way that you can get to the shortcut to combine the island with this treehouse path. So you can see a combination of ideas starting. When you go, we'll keep a keep that in mind. We'll talk about that soon. But let's talk about this green path. So this one's a little bit different than the rest of them. And you can see that it actually uses different types of puzzles. It actually uses the puzzles from the marsh, which it's the only place in this area that does so. And it uses both the combination, so the tetrominoes, and it also uses the, on one puzzle, it actually uses the blue, so the reductionism that we saw. It also has one puzzle concept that has one color of tetromino with another color, and you can actually combine both of those. And then multiple colors together. So a lot of some of the hardest problems, honestly, are in this green path, which is kind of funny considering that green path is this path of nature. You're trying to be more one with nature, and yet some of the hardest problems, the ones that take the most mental resources, are the ones that lead you to this green path. So we get this one area, and all you see is a building. Again, it looks very, very weathered. These are probably the most weathered buildings in the whole area, or by this green path right here. You can see that it's a lot darker wood, but it still looks to be made of the same type of wood as the other ones, just over years and years and years. So we get the puzzle panel in that area. What we also get is and one more audio quote. So let's listen to that, and we'll go to the last area afterwards. So we can switch this one. This goes 3 directions as well. And it takes us right to here. We can't actually get into this building. There's no way of doing that, but there is an audio log hiding right about here.
When we choose silence, we choose to give up the reasons not to love, which are the reasons for going to war, or continuing war, or separating, or being a victim, or being right. In a moment of silence, in a moment of no thought, no mind, we choose to give those up. This is what my teacher invited me to. Just choose silence. Don't even choose love. Choose silence, and love is apparent. If we choose love, we already have an idea of what love is. But if you choose silence, that is the end of ideas. You are willing to have no idea, to see what is present when there is no idea, past, present, future. No idea of love, no idea of truth, no idea of you, no idea of me. Love is apparent. Gangaji, 2009.
And pretty fitting to have that quote in the green path. So yeah, again, just kind of saying that, like, don't worry about things. Don't think about things. It's in a very interesting juxtaposition because, again, we're dealing with puzzles that involve the most thought process. Yet this whole thing is saying, don't think about things. Don't worry about all of these other emotions or anything else. And at least for me, I don't know if this is intended. I feel like it is. But when I'm looking at all these puzzle panels, the only thing I could really think about was solving these puzzles. I wasn't really thinking about emotions, or I wasn't really thinking about the environment around me or what it meant or anything else. I was just focused on one puzzle at a time, just blasting through in my head some of these you wrote down or anything else. But that's what's cool about that, is it's kind of giving you that same concept, right? You're not really thinking about emotions. You're not really thinking about, well, what does this mean or what does that mean? You're just focusing on a problem, and everything else is kind of going to the background. Everything else is really becoming silent, and I'm really hoping it's intentional, and I'm not going too crazy on it, but I think that's the intended way that they wanted it. So, and then you can see that if you go down, you get some really cool stuff. This is where the other side of the yellow panel is that has no actual panel pieces. Get a nice little window out here. And no other tangible rewards. The green paths almost never have tangible rewards at all. You can see, again, really old weathered planks that came up here. But what's really neat is that it's brand new planks. And we again get this kind of interesting texture. I think we might need to bump up the, yeah, there we go. If you can see it on here now, you can actually see that kind of interesting pattern style that we saw one of the panels in the monastery with it. We're going to see a little bit more of that panel. So again, keep it in mind, but it's there in this kind of green hidden, just come here to observe more, to see more, but not really get any tangible rewards out of it. So that's the treehouse area. So that's a lot of words, but what on earth are we actually doing here? What is this area really about? And it seems like because of the way the symbols are, because of the way that orange is used in kind of that time setting that we're going to talk about a little bit later, because of the way that purple is using technology, the green is using this kind of peace and tranquility and just being one with nature. All of these audio quotes that are different views, but in general are kind of saying the same thing, that this area is really about this duality. You see it, there's multiple states of things, even if it's the exact same thing. Orange in this case, you need to go through this kind of more natural path, that there's no puzzles whatsoever, this green path, along with being able to go through this more technological, more robust path down the road. And you have to combine the two of those things to be able to get to that laser. You need to be able to combine technology and time, or you need to combine the purple and the orange, or technology and more so time. We're going to talk, I'm being vague with orange. We're going to be vague for a little bit still, but that combination allows you to get to the island directly. One other really cool thing that I want to talk about here. Oops, if I remember how to do it. There we go. Well, we're talking about that. So yeah, this dichotomy, this kind of collection of things where one thing by itself isn't going to get you the answer. You have to start combining things. This whole area is about man kind of living with nature. It's not destroying nature around here, but it's building things around it to be able to make it work. You're seeing technology being used as not a negative thing like it's being portrayed in some areas of the island, but it's actually here very, very useful. It's the only way you can actually get to the end of the island. And so this whole area is about combining ideas. Really neat. Something that we're going to hopefully talk about before the end of this playthrough is you can see yourself a nice little shadow. I love the fact that you can actually, like when you turn your head or turn the camera, it actually turns your head so it angles down and up. But keep in mind, you start seeing your shadow in a couple different places, and we'll talk about that down the road. But that's really what this area at the end of the day is. It's a combination of a lot of ideas coming together and jiving with each other. They really fit very much like these, I call them stars, but they very much could be cogs, would probably be a better way of phrasing it, that they fit in just, they fit in just the right way so that everything actually works out for it. There we go. And when you do all of that, then you can kind of get this peaceful tranquility, this kind of sense of love, the sense that everything is good. And that's what this whole area is meant to represent. You can see, the only other thing I'll talk about is that kind of red mentality in it. So you see that red, which we saw in the monastery, which is more that Zen style experience, but it came through epiphany. It came through putting questions that don't really have an answer, and you're talking about them, and that's what got you the results for the monastery section. And in here, you're solving all of these problems and problems and problems in this most natural area. But after you've kind of solved all of them, you can kind of just look around you, and you realize that nature and technology and all of these things are combining together, and that's what's giving you this kind of cohesive experience, this cohesive whole. which is what this area is really trying to represent, is really trying to show. So that is the tree houses. Like I said, this is probably, in all of the areas, probably the most complex. It uses one of the biggest combinations of ideas all combined together, and really, really just merges them in some very interesting ways. Next time, we're going to be kind of switching gears a fair amount. We're actually going to be going right over here to the keep, and we're going to be learning a little bit about something that people have a lot of questions on, which is the statues. This is really, save a couple exceptions, the first time we're really going to deal with statues and kind of deal with a more human perspective, we'll put it that way. So that's what we're going to deal with next time. I hope you guys really enjoyed the episode. I know it's been a little bit long, but this area is one of the biggest areas in the game, so I hope you have bared with me to the end. Thank you for those that did. Thank you guys, honestly, for just all of the support with this series. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you guys so much for it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys next time in another episode of The Witness.